I think it was beautiful. The firemen took his body, and because they respected and loved him so much, they didn't want to leave it in the street. So they quickly carried it into a church, and not just left it in the vestibule. They went up the center aisle. They put the body in front of the altar. They covered it with a sheet, and on the sheet they placed his stole and his fire badge. And then they knelt down and they thanked God.
Also laid to rest today, former federal prosecutor and conservative commentator Barbara Olson. The wife of the U.S. Solicitor General Theodore Olson was among the 64 passengers and crew members on the American Airlines flight that crashed into the Pentagon. Barbara was eulogized by Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who said she had a wonderful spirit. She was also a good friend to all of us here at CNN. My colleague Greta Van Susteren is standing by here in Washington. For the next half hour, she will focus on the investigation into Tuesday's terrorist attacks. Greta?
Wolf, investigators are connecting the dots, and the line still points at Osama bin Laden. President Bush today called bin Laden, quote, the prime suspect. But there are still plenty of unanswered questions about Tuesday's terrorist attacks on the U.S. CNN's Mike Betcher is in Atlanta with the very latest on the investigation. Mike, let me first start right with the most important question. Is it all over, the terrorism on Tuesday? Has it stopped, or should we still have fear? I guess we've lost contact with Mike Betcher. When he becomes available, we'll bring him right back. But as details of the terrorism plot unfold, ordinary people are discovering to their horror that they knew some of the hijackers. One man not only knew a couple of them, he helped teach them to fly. CNN's John Zarrella has his story.
In this terrible act,
Henry George is carrying a terrible weight, a burden he says he will carry to his grave.
I don't have an extensive vocabulary where I can come up with words to express, how you feel to have been, part of this thing.
Last December 29th and 30th at his Opa-locka flight training school, George gave two Middle Eastern men some basic lessons in a simulator on how to fly a jet aircraft. The two men were Mohammed Atta and Marwan al-Shari. Federal law enforcement agents believe Atta and al-Shari were likely flying the planes that hit the World Trade Center towers. The story they gave their flight instructor was this.
They were on their way home, and they wanted the exposure to jet flying, or an introduction to jet flying, because they were hoping to get a job with their airline in their country.
George says Egypt was mentioned once or twice. No less than 12 of the 19 suspected hijackers lived in South Florida for a time. Federal agents believe at least 4 of the pilots trained here, spending tens of thousands of dollars, mostly cash, on flying lessons. Florida made sense. Flight training schools are everywhere. It's a huge business. They could get all the training they needed and never spend too much time in one place. Atta and al-Shari first surfaced at Huffman Aviation in Venice, on Florida's west coast, where they took lessons. That was 6 months before they showed up at Henry George's flight school, which wasn't their final stop. One of the two, Atta, as recently as 3 weeks ago, rented this plane at Palm Beach Flight Training.
He was a normal person, very well spoken. He just said he wanted to build 100 hours and he wanted to fly a low-wing aircraft, so I showed him our airplanes, and he decided that he wanted to fly this one right here.
The Opa-locka flight instructor had a similar experience with Atta and al-Shari. They were low-key, and in the simulator there was nothing special about their flying abilities.
What I can recollect from my memory is that we mostly did turns in a couple of approaches. I don't think we did any more than that.
What they didn't do, George says, is practice how to land. John Zarrella, CNN, Miami.
Joining me from Fort Myers, Florida, is someone else who has suddenly discovered you cannot tell a terrorist from an ordinary guy. Rudy Deckers is president of Huffman Aviation, a flight school that John Zarrella just mentioned. Rudy, which terrorist or which one of the suspected terrorists did you come in contact with?
Good evening. I've spoken with Mahmoud Atta and with Marine Hashimi.
Let me first talk about Mr. Atta. What was it that, was there anything unusual about him to you?
The only thing that was unusual on him is that when I saw him, I didn't like him at all. He had a behavior that he felt he was above everybody. He was not acting normal by making contact with people. He was there apparently with our flight school to obtain training, and he was not socializing with anybody. As a matter of fact, he was rude to everybody.
When did you first meet Mr. Atta?
When I meet Atta, is that what you said?
Yeah, when did you first meet him?
He came into our facility July 3rd, 2000. He left January 3rd this year.
And Mr. Ashari, was there anything unusual about him?
No, he was a likely young man. He was very friendly, laughing. He enjoyed flying. He was more normal, to say. Of course, we don't call him normal anymore for what they did, but they were not socializing with anybody else. The two stuck together and didn't socialize with any other students. We are used to that with the Middle East students, though.
When Mr. Atta was training, did he get extensive training with you?
When Atta walked into our facility and checked it out, he showed that he already had a private pilot license obtained with another school somewhere in Florida.
So what did he want from you?
I can't hear you.
What did he want from you? What kind of training did he want from you?
Okay. They obtained both their private, commercial, single-engine, multi-engine training. They did the multi-engine training in a Piper Seneca 2. It's a six-seater, two-engine. It's a very small airplane.
Now, Rudy, is the training that they received on the small airplane, was it enough to steer a big aircraft to a target?
Well, no, I have said no, although I'm not a professional on the big airplanes, only on the small airplanes. We checked with some captains of airlines, and they said no. We heard indeed that they went somewhere South Florida to obtain more training in a simulator, and as I understand, they trained in a 737, and that's where they get some more experience. But with our licenses, they're only at the start to begin to fly with other equipment, but they need to get training.
Looking back, Rudy, is there any sort of thing that you sort of think to yourself tonight, oh, I should have been, this should have been a tip to me or a clue that there might be something afoot?
No. We found nothing. Even now we know what they did. We couldn't find anything that was a sense of anything. Atta was just not a likable person. We couldn't find anything. I heard you saying or one of your colleagues saying that they paid cash with other facilities. At our facility, they paid with checks as they were going. They paid a $1,000 check, 2 weeks later another $1,000 check. There was nothing irregular. All the students that come over to the facility from overseas, they come there to obtain the commercial license to fly back home in an airline. And there was nothing, absolutely nothing, that we had to fly, any clue what they were doing.
All right, Rudy Deckers, thank you for joining me this evening.
Okay.
The terrorists not only attended flight school in Florida, they rented cars there. Brad Warwick now knows he did repeat business with one of them. He joins me from Fort Lauderdale. Brad, with whom did you do business?
Both Mohammed Atta and his cousin, Marwan.
And did you notice anything unusual about them?
No, the funny part is everything was totally on the up and up. All their information matched. They had driver's license, Florida driver's license, Allstate insurance, addresses on everything matched. They seemed to be a normal customer with not a very heavy accent at all.
Brad, now the first time you rented a car, as I know, to Mr. Atta, it was in August of this year, is that right?
That's right. August 6th was the very first time.
How is it that you even remember renting a car to him, since I assume you rent lots of cars?
Well, the funny coincidence is I was the person that rented the car to him each time he was in, and I closed the contract each time he was in, except for the very last time on Sunday. I was not working that day, and somebody else took care of the cousin when the cousin returned the car. But other than that, it was myself all the time.
Did you actually have a conversation with him and spend some time talking to him while he was at the counter, or was it strictly business?
No, we didn't engage in any personal conversation as what he was doing or where he was going, other than he told me he was going over to the West Coast, and he actually even called me from the West Coast once when he was over there. But other than that, it was all strictly normal business.
Did he tell you his occupation?
No, he did not.
Did you have any indication that there might be something afoot with him?
No, actually, he spoke to be a very intelligent man and conducted himself as such, and I thought he was just a businessman that was doing some traveling in the state of Florida, and also when he left one time, he returned a card, said he was going up to New York, and he was coming back in a few days, and he did, and started another contract. So I just thought he was another businessman.
Was it weird that he started one contract, ended it, and then started another one? Was that unusual at all?
No, because he left to go up to New York, and he came back.
What about the second car that he rented? I understand he put about 1,000 miles on it within about 2 weeks?
Actually, no, he put 1,900 miles on it over the course of 2 weeks, and that was the car he took over to Venice. He called me from Venice to let me know that the service engine soon light comes on. The car needed to be serviced and wanted to know if that was something you should be alarmed about. And I said, no, just let me know when you bring the car back.
Is it unusual to put 1,900 miles on a car in that period of time or not?
Well, a local person wouldn't be, but if it's a person traveling around the strait like tourists do or business people do, I mean, it's nothing to send up a red flag of any type of alarm, because some people do rent a car to do some traveling.
What was your impression of him?
My impression of him was, number one, he was a nice, polite man. I never had any problem with him, and he was very intelligent and appeared to be a businessman.
When you read about the fact that his name, at least people believe that he is one of the hijackers, what did you think?
Well, I was shocked as the pieces of the puzzle started unfolding here, and I realized that how much we were involved in it and how much close contact I had with an international terrorist. Yeah, it was quite shocking.
And when he brought the car back, I assume there were no problems, nothing unusual whatsoever?
No, he looked out for my best interest and let me know about a car that needed to be serviced. They didn't trash the cars or abuse them at all.
All right, my thanks to Brad Warwick for joining me this evening.
You're welcome.
Joining me on the phone right now is Richard Surma. He owns a motel in Deerfield Beach, Florida. Some of the men suspected of being terrorists apparently stayed there studying flight manuals. Good evening, sir.
Good evening.
Can you tell me what you know about these suspected terrorists?
They were nice people, average acting, and pretty intelligent, I would say. And they were kept to themselves.
When did they first rent a room?
They came in August 26th for 1 week. They paid, and then they paid again another week, September 2nd. They stayed till September the 9th.
And how many men were there?
Two in one room, but one extra visitor kept visiting them every single day.
And do you know who that was?
No, it never dawned on me to ask. One time he slept there overnight just before they checked out the next day, and my wife asked him, "What are you doing here?" But then they were gentle people, so she left them alone.
Was there anything left in the room after they moved out that was unusual?
Just one utility knife, one of those razor box cutter things, and some a box frozen food that looks like spinach, but it was in Arabic, so I didn't know what it was inside.
When you say utility knife, could you describe it more fully, please?
It was kind of thin. The newer type, not the bulky one.
Is it the kind of knife that you'd buy at your local hardware store, just a regular carpet knife or box knife?
Yes.
And has that been turned over to the FBI?
The FBI put it in the bags.
And have they done sort of forensic testing of the room, or they fingerprinted the room and looked at it?
Oh, yes, they did. They sealed it off completely, and they stayed here for 3 days, 3 nights, dusting and putting some violet dye on it.
All right.
There was also some things in the dumpster that they threw out. That was the thing I kept.
Which was? And what else was in the dumpster?
Well, there was flight manuals and a lot of maps from the eastern part of the United States. But there were aeronautical maps, and there was also a fuel tester. It looked like a giant syringe. And also there was a German-English dictionary and 3 martial arts books.
All right. Thank you very much for joining me tonight, sir.
You're welcome.
Now to CNN's Mike Betcher in Atlanta with the very latest on the investigation. Mike, when I thought I'd contact with you before, I wanted to know the answer to the question, is the fear over?